Hello, I'm Dawn Durham, and welcome to PaTTANpod. In talking about students who have significant cognitive disabilities, we often hear that statement, should I be teaching grade level content? Here to help us answer that question is Dr. Pam Mims from East Tennessee State University and Dr. Ginevra Cortate from the University of Louisville. Thank you both for being on PaTTANpod today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
I want to talk about what are the benefits when we think about students with significant cognitive disabilities. What are the benefits to them with grade level or grade aligned content? Why would we bother to think about algebra or identifying literature themes?
Well, I think first of all, just the basis of giving them a chance to know more knowledge about topics. So thinking about having more knowledge is going to obviously make you more prepared for competitive employment after school, right? So just having knowledge of math skills and literacy skills is going to help with those things.
I think that students need to be able to problem solve in real world contexts, so giving them that opportunity is very important.
I also think there's some underlying, so for example on the literature thing, so like, a standard on like looking at two characters from different stories and comparing the characters. So why would we need to do that? So we do a lot of research in this area, and just anecdotally, some of the things that have happened have been pretty amazing. So, a kid with pretty significant autism. Once we had just finished up Holes, the late elementary, early middle school book, and we were reading Outsiders, and he made a connection. He's like, about bullying, right, which is a big theme in both of those stories, and said, these characters, this is like Stanley from Holes. This character is being bullied. And then talked about his own experience with bullying, right? And so right away there's this connection with characters from literature and what that could teach them about how to respond to different circumstances they encounter in real life. So, I think that the benefits are endless. And who are we to say, like, okay, well, these three things are the benefits we're going to see, because I think it's very individualized what we'll see in regard to benefits for the population.
So it's really giving students access to all learning, because we want our students to have access to all learning, as you had said, for competitive employment later on,
Correct.
For connections to their own life, for being able to have access to world knowledge, this kind of general knowledge of the world and of iconic classic symbols and iconic storylines, and allowing them to have that, to be self-fulfilling goals, to obtain those self-fulfilling goals. So I think that is a crucial piece. You had said you did a lot of research, so I want to ask you for a minute about your research. Have you been able to capture perhaps any differences when grade-aligned content is delivered in different environments in a school setting? Have we seen anything through the research in that regard?
Well, we know that the research is really robust on the benefits for inclusion, so full inclusion,
Right.
And what we'll see is increased post-school outcomes and just so many benefits. I don't know if we have a ton of research that shows the difference of teaching grade-aligned content in inclusive settings versus non, but we're always going to promote full inclusion as much as possible.
Sure.
There has been some research, it's limited in the gen ed classroom, primarily using peer tutors, and again, more anecdotally, that was important socially also, besides the grade-aligned content for all the students that were involved.
And we also, I like to say I'm a special educator. I'm not a gen ed content expert. I'm never pretending. I'm never pretending to be the content expert. The gen ed teacher is, and so why not have instruction provided by the expert?
Sure.
But we don't think that if a school's not set up or doesn't have the infrastructure for inclusion, we don't think that should prevent teachers from promoting or teaching grade-aligned content. If it's the case that you have your own classroom, a self-contained class, you need to be reaching out to the gen ed content expert to find out what does a standard in science mean? What does it look like to teach this standard in your class? And how can I make it work in my class? And it might bridge opportunities for slowly starting to include that student in the gen ed lessons more often.
So really that collaboration piece.
Yes.
Whether you're in a self-contained classroom or an inclusion classroom, it's that collaboration so that I am maintaining my consistency and my fidelity and my accuracy of the content being learned and being taught. So I think that is a crucial piece. Yeah, I don't know that we always get to that collaboration piece, but I do think it's a crucial piece to really be something we need to reflect on and be more mindful of.
I think it's a critical starting point, especially like Pam said, if you don't have, my degrees are in special education, not science.
Yeah.
So again, I need a content expert so that I'm sure what I'm teaching is the right thing and I'm not teaching any misconceptions.
Sure, sure. I mean, that makes perfect sense for all of us, right? We can't be an expert in everything, so we need to reach out to our colleagues who are experts in other pieces and facets, so that's great. When we think about this grade-aligned content and this grade-aligned teaching, what are some critical factors that we need to think about that would impact that learning for our students who have significant cognitive disabilities?
Well, from our research, we know that the tried and true systematic instruction is critical. So whether it's ELA, math, or science, or functional skills, or communication skills, or any other skills, we know that good systematic instruction, which would be prompting and ways to systematically fade those prompts over time, and principles of reinforcement and error correction, and then data collection and using the data to guide decision making. I mean, all of those, the basics of what we know work for the population, we've now applied it to teaching academics, and we've seen lots of success.
I think it's critical that kids can show what they know. And so that was, I've been doing this research for a long time, and that was a piece right at the beginning. You know, I was asking questions to a student who was verbal and could verbally communicate, but the questions were so different because they were related to science that she needed some picture supports to be able to answer those types of questions. So we have to give the students the opportunities, or else we don't know what they know.
And also, in a more the other side, so nonverbal, let's say there's a student with spastic CP, really very limited hand use. So what we would see a lot is that when teachers were doing lessons, that they would take the student's hand and pull it to find the response option, and the student could be asleep, right, and still being engaged in that lesson. And so what we would say is, what is the students, what can they do independently? Do they have a consistent eye gaze? Because that's a way that they could show what they know on their own, right? And that makes them active, not passive. And so that's a critical feature, is make sure that they're providing opportunities for active responses so that they can make them on their own and be engaged. I'm trying to think of what I think there's content-specific strategies, right, that we've identified as evidence-based practices for ELA, for math, and for science. One of the kind of strands that runs through them all is a story-based lesson approach, so using text. So if I'm teaching a lesson on, I don't know, Number the Stars, which is a fictional novel, we might bridge in some social studies, and there might be a way to bridge in some science inquiry lesson or a math lesson. There was a part in the story about cooking, and if there's if it lines up to a standard of this assigned grade, how do we bridge that? And so you are using this text to bridge into teaching all these different academic skills across content areas. But not just that, like you can create stories for math.
Right, I think the text gives the context. Instead of just teaching a rote science lesson or a math lesson, students need to be able to problem solve in real world settings, and that text can set up the context.
Yeah, so in science we talk about like wonder stories, so it kind of sets the stage for wondering about, well, why my mom has straight hair, my dad has curly hair, I have straight hair, why do I have, and it kind of looks like, wait, this goes back to the Punnett Square, and figuring out how that all works. And so having this kind of story-based approach to get them started with that, teaching that science standard,
kind of science-minded
or
approach,
a math standard, or whatever it might be. What else? I think we know that response cards, which has traditionally been a strategy for kids with high incidence disabilities or kids without disabilities, we've seen a lot of luck. We've had a lot of luck in the research for response cards across content areas. And then again, more specific based on the content area, like manipulatives.
Graphic organizers for math.
It kind of sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but what's good for students with significant cognitive disabilities is good for all students. I mean, we're talking explicit instruction, using data to guide our instruction, active participation, increased response opportunities, making adjustments for the needs of the students. we want this for all of our students,
We do.
right? We really shouldn't be thinking about
It
this.
shouldn't
in
be that complicated.
It shouldn't be that complicated. Well, it shouldn't. No, we were, maybe we need to stop thinking about of students with significant cognitive disabilities, students on the autism spectrum, students who are typically developing, with their typically developing peers. All students benefit from these factors,
Yes.
and that's really where we need to be focused. Is that this is good for all students. And we need to be mindful of that. So I appreciate
Yes.
that insight. Thank you so much for making sure that we came to that conclusion. I think
Yeah.
that's a good kind of statement to make sure that we put out there publicly. So thank you for that. I want to ask you this, and we ask this of all of our PaTTANpod guests. Our goal is to inspire others to grow educationally. What advice might you offer to those in the field to help them along that path?
My advice for teaching GradeAligned content would be to collaborate, like we were talking about earlier, to go to that content teacher and say, how do you teach this? What does this mean? Especially the upper grade levels, I think are very difficult.
Sure.
And so if you don't have that math background or science background, you need somebody to tell you, what does this mean? How do I use it in the real world?
I think that's great advice. I agree, collaborate.
Thank
But,
you.
I also would add that have high expectations, right? So
Yeah.
we often hear, we present nationally, internationally, and we see teachers all over and they say, well, you don't understand my kids.
Right.
Oh, yes.
They can't. And I taught kids with the most significant disabilities for 7 years, and it's one of those things that why not? It won't hurt, right?
Right.
So why not assume that they can understand? It won't hurt. But if you do assume that they possibly might not understand and don't give them the opportunity, it could hurt, right?
Sure.
And so I think we've seen from our work, we just keep that glass ceiling that we inadvertently have for this population. We keep pushing that glass. We're trying to break through the glass
Smash
ceiling.
it.
Yeah, we're trying to smash it. But there are times that we're thinking, oh gosh, how am I going to teach this? And then we
Sure.
just kind of jump in 2 feet first and try it. And again, with those good strategies we know are effective, good systematic instruction, we've seen amazing things from kids with very complex needs.
Sure, yeah. So collaborating and then holding those high expectations
Yeah.
because our students can do these things.
Yes.
And I agree with you. I'd like to smash that glass ceiling, but we'll start with pushing it up, and we'll smash it. We will get there. Thank you so much, Dr. Mims and Dr. Cortate, for being with us on PaTTANpod. We so appreciate your insight and your time today. It was wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you in the field. You inspire educational growth in your students every day. A special thank you to John Ragsdale for producing this podcast. We'll see you next time on PaTTANpod.